My best friend sent me a text at 5:30 in the evening, and I almost did not read it. I was tired. It had been one of those days at the office where the hours felt twice as long as they should. My jacket was already over my arm. My bag was on my shoulder. I was 3 steps from the door when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting nothing important. It was Isabel. "Come over for dinner tonight. I am cooking." That was it.
No explanación.
"No, is that okay? Or are you free?" Just those 8 words dropped into my evening like a stone into still water. I smiled without thinking about it. That was the thing about Isabel Hartwell. 7 years of friendship, and she still texted like we lived down the street from each other, like the answer was obviously yes. And most of the time it was. I typed back, "On my way." I told myself this was a normal Thursday. Isabel cooked. I showed up. We ate too much and talked too late, and I drove home with leftovers in a bag on my passenger seat. We had done it more times than I could count. There was nothing unusual about this. I grabbed my toolbox from under my desk before I left. She had mentioned a loose cabinet hinge the week before, and I had been meaning to fix it. That is the kind of friendship we had. I noticed the small things she mentioned, and she remembered every detail I thought I had said in passing. 7 years builds that kind of language between people. The drive across the city took longer than I expected. A light drizzle had started, and the streets were slick and slow. I turned the radio down and drove with just the sound of the rain and the wipers ticking back and forth. The city looked good in the wet dark. All the lights doubled themselves on the pavement. Isabel lived in a townhouse on the quieter end of the city, a part of town with wide sidewalks and old trees and the kind of brick buildings that looked like they had been standing since before anyone could remember. She had worked hard for that house. I had helped her move in 3 years ago, carrying boxes up 2 flights of stairs while she directed traffic from the doorway with a coffee in her hand. I remembered thinking that day that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. I rang the bell and stood on the top step with my toolbox in one hand and my collar turned up against the drizzle. The door opened almost immediately. She must have been close to it. Isabel stood there in dark jeans and a soft gray knit sweater, barefoot on the hardwood floor, hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. No blazer, no heels, nothing pressed or polished. Just her, relaxed in a way she rarely managed during the workweek. She looked up at me and smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that started in her eyes before it reached her mouth. But there was something underneath it, something tight, something she was holding carefully in place. "Hey," she said. "Come in." I stepped inside. The warmth of the house reached me right away, and then the smell hit me. Roasted chicken, garlic, butter, something bright with lemon underneath it all. My stomach answered before I could. I had not eaten since noon. Then I heard voices. They came from somewhere deeper in the house. Low, unhurried voices. A man and a woman talking the way people talk when they are comfortable, when they belong somewhere. I stopped just past the entry mat, toolbox still in hand. I turned to look at her. "You did not say you had company," I said. Her hand came up and touched my arm. Just lightly, just for a second. "I needed you to actually show up," she said. Her voice had dropped. She was not whispering exactly, but she was being careful. "If I had told you everything, you would have made an excuse." I frowned. "Everything? What does that mean? What is going on, Isabel?" She opened her mouth. But before she could answer, a woman's voice floated down the hallway from the dining room, warm and carrying. "Isabel, sweetheart, your father wants to start before it gets cold." I watched Isabel's face do something complicated. Her jaw tightened for just a fraction of a second. Then she smoothed it back into calm. She looked up at me with something that was not quite an apology but was close to one. "Please," she said quietly, "just walk with me. Do not make a scene right here." I should have turned around. I want to be honest about that. Every sensible part of me knew I should have set my toolbox down, told her I would call her tomorrow, and walked back out into the rain. I barely had my jacket off, but she was my best friend, and she was asking me, and there was something in her eyes that I had never seen there before, something small and frightened that she was working very hard to hide. So I walked with her, I set the toolbox quietly by the entry table. I could fix the hinge later. The dining room was the kind of room that did not leave any room for doubt about who lived there. Long walnut table. Cloth napkins folded into neat rectangles. Real candles in short glass holders, not the battery kind people buy when they want the look without the effort. A large painting of a coastline hung above the sideboard, calm water, early light, the kind of image that felt expensive without trying to. Everything in the room had been chosen carefully, and everything had been in its place for a long time. Two people sat at the far end of the table. The man I recognized before Isabel said a word. Gerald Hartwell. I had seen his photograph in the firm's annual report more than once. Broad shoulders even now. Silver at the temples. The kind of face that had learned to show very little on purpose. He was watching me the same way he probably watched quarterly projections, measuring, comparing, deciding. The woman next to him I had never met in person, but I knew who she was the second she looked up. She had the same sharp focus in her gaze as Isabel, the same composed set to her jaw, same cheekbones. But where Isabel's expressions moved quickly, this woman's face was still, controlled. Margaret Hartwell had clearly spent a long time deciding exactly how much of herself she showed to rooms full of people. Both of them looked at me at precisely the same moment. Isabel's voice came out bright and deliberate. "Mom, Dad, I want you to meet someone." Her hand found mine at her side. Not a casual touch, not an accident. A decision. Her fingers laced through mine and held. "This is Joel," she said. Then she took one small breath, and she said it. "He is my boyfriend." The word dropped into the room like something heavy hitting a glass floor. Her father's fork paused halfway to his mouth and stayed there. Her mother's eyes swept over me in one long, smooth movement. Work jacket, plain shirt. The presence of someone who had shown up without expecting this room. I felt the weight of both of them looking and finding me smaller than whatever they had expected. My heart was going hard against my ribs. My brain was running through every possible exit route. I could have laughed. I could have said something like, "She is joking, you know how she is." I could have created a graceful way out for all of us. Instead, I pulled out the chair beside Isabel and sat down like I had been doing it for years. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell," I said. "Thank you for having me." There was a pause. A beat where the room decided what it was going to do. Then Gerald set his fork down, picked up his napkin, and said, "What do you do at the firm, Joel?" "Senior analyst," I said. "I work on the infrastructure side." He nodded once. I still reading me, and he moved on. But it was not a warm move forward. It was the kind of thing a man does when he is filing information away and deciding where it belongs. Dinner was a long, careful exam. Gerald's questions sounded like conversation, but they were not. Where had I grown up? What did my parents do for work? Had I always planned to go into finance, or had I fallen into it? His tone never changed. He asked each question the same way, like he was reading from a list he had memorized a long time ago. I answered him straight. I grew up in a mid-sized city about 4 hours from here. My father worked in logistics. My mother had been a primary school teacher for 22 years. Yes, I was the first in my family to work in finance. No, I had not planned it. I had gotten good at numbers and followed where they led. Gerald's mouth moved in a small, controlled way when I said that, like he had expected exactly that answer. Margaret asked softer questions that pressed on different walls. How long had Isabel and I known each other? Had we met through work? Did I see myself staying at the firm long term? Or was I the kind of person who moved around? She smiled while she asked all of it, which somehow made it worse. A smile with no give in it. A smile that was doing a job. Under the table, Isabel's knee stayed pressed against mine the entire time. When she needed both hands to cut her chicken, she moved her foot next to mine instead. She was keeping contact on purpose. A small, steady signal that she had not forgotten I was there. Toward the end of the meal, her mother said something that made the air in the room go very slightly different. "We thought you might bring Victor this time," Margaret said, speaking to Isabel with her eyes on me. "Victor Ashby. He has been so involved with everything this quarter." I did not know who Victor Ashby was yet, but I saw what the name did to Isabel's jaw. The smallest, quickest tightening, there and then gone. Victor is a colleague, Isabel said. Joel is my boyfriend. She said it the second time with more weight than the first, like a line being pressed into the table. Not a bluff. A fact she was making real by saying it out loud. Later, on the pretense of helping with the dessert plates, Isabel pulled me into the small pantry off the kitchen. She shut the door behind us. Cinnamon and dried herbs in the air. Barely room for both of us. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and took out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into my hands. It was thick paper, the kind used for official documents. Read that later, she said. But here is what it says in plain language. She looked up at me. There was no performance in her face now.
No quer brightness.
Just her, tired and honest. They want me publicly committed to Victor Ashby before the Winter Gala, she said. If I refuse, I lose my voting rights, my shares, my name on decisions I have spent 10 years building toward. Everything goes into a trust that my father and Victor control together.
Isterte here.
She held my gaze. I know this is not fair, she said. I know I lied to get you here. If you leave right now, I will understand. But if you stay, even for just tonight, I need you to be exactly what I told them you are. The candles were still burning in the dining room. I could hear the quiet sound of her parents' voices and the soft clink of plates. I looked down at the folded paper in my hands. Then I looked back at her. I am not leaving, I said. She stared at me for a moment like she was waiting for me to take it back. I did not. But I needed her to answer one thing before we went any further. I needed to know she was not just buying time. I needed to know she actually wanted to fight this. Tell me what you want, I said. Not what you are afraid of losing. What do you actually want? She did not answer right away. She leaned back against the pantry shelf, arms crossed over her chest, looking at the floor. A small muscle worked in her jaw. When she finally looked up, the careful, composed version of her was completely gone. I want out, she said. I do not want Victor Ashby in my firm or in my life. He has been circling for months, and my parents have been helping him do it, and I am exhausted from pretending I do not see it. I have given 10 years to that company. It has my name on the door. And somehow I am standing here trying to talk my own parents out of handing it over to a man I do not trust. She took a breath. Her hands had stopped shaking. I just did not know how to say no without losing everything, she said. So I called the one person I knew would actually show up. That was enough. We walked back into the dining room together, her fingers in mine, and we finished the dinner. I watched her through the rest of the meal. She sat straight. She answered her mother's questions with patience. She did not flinch when Victor's name came up a second time, and she did not explain herself when she changed the subject. There was a steadiness to her that had not been there before we went into that pantry, like she had made a decision and the decision had given her something solid to stand on. Gerald eventually leaned back in his chair and looked at her directly. Have you thought seriously about the gala? He asked. About the kind of message it sends if things remain unclear? Isabel set her wine glass down with a quiet click. I have thought about it every day since the proposal landed on my desk, she said. I have thought about the investors, about the optics, about the merger. I have thought about all of it. And what I know is that I will not tie my future to a man just to make a slide deck look more appealing. The room went very still. I spoke before I fully decided to. If the deal only holds together when there is an approved name on her arm, I said, looking at Gerald steadily, then the numbers were probably never as strong as the presentation suggested. Gerald's eyes moved to me, sharp and unreadable. Margaret lifted her napkin and pressed it to the corner of her mouth. We will not discuss business at the table, she said. Her voice was polished and final. But something had shifted. I could feel it. The angle of the room had changed, just slightly. Gerald refilled his water glass without speaking. He did not look at his wife. He stared at the middle of the table like he was doing arithmetic in his head. After dinner, while Margaret and Isabel were in the kitchen, Gerald and I sat alone at the table for several long minutes. He folded his hands. He studied me the way I imagined he studied risk assessments, looking for the places where the surface did not match what was underneath. "I want to be straightforward with you," he said. "This family has spent a very long time building something. That does not happen without difficult decisions." "I understand that," I said. His eyes held mine. "If you are in this girl's life," he said, "you need to understand the weight of it." "I do not scare easily," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Victor Ashby is going to make your life harder. You should know that." "I already figured," I said. He looked at me for another few seconds. Then he picked up his coffee cup and said nothing more, which, from a man like Gerald Hartwell, might have been its own kind of answer. I drove home late. Rain had replaced the drizzle. The streets were dark and wet and mostly empty. I waited until I was parked under a streetlight outside my apartment building before I unfolded the document Isabel had pressed into my hands in the pantry. It was a governance memo. Internal, marked confidential, dated 6 weeks ago. Most of it was standard merger language, the kind of thing I read at the office and processed without much feeling. But near the bottom, tucked in after 3 paragraphs of legal boilerplate, was a clause that made my stomach go cold. In the event that Isabel Hartwell is unable or unwilling to fulfill a public commitment to an approved partner before the date of the Winter Gala, her voting shares will transfer temporarily to a joint trust administered by Gerald Hartwell and senior partner Victor Ashby. I read it twice, then a third time. This was not a suggestion. This was not a family preference dressed up in soft language. This was a mechanism. Someone had built a legal trap inside a business document and aimed it directly at her. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. Unknown number. I picked it up. For words on the screen, "We should talk, Joel." I stared at it. The number was not in my contacts. But the timing, right after leaving that house, right after reading that document, was not an accident. Someone had either been watching the evening unfold, or they had a reason to know exactly what I had just read. I did not reply. I locked the phone and sat in the parked car for a long time, listening to the rain. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about that clause buried in the governance memo. I thought about the way Gerald had spoken at the table, careful, measured, but not unkind. I thought about Margaret watching everything with those still, recording eyes. And I thought about Isabel in the pantry, pressing that paper into my hands like it weighed more than paper should. I was at the office before sunrise. The building was half empty at that hour. Just the cleaning crew and the early risers and the hum of computers that never fully switched off. I liked it quiet. I spread out at my desk with a coffee going cold beside me, and I opened every document my access level allowed. Not to find anything dramatic. Just to look. Just to understand what I was actually standing in the middle of. Victor Ashby arrived in my doorway at 7:52. I did not hear him coming. One moment the doorway was empty, and then he was there. Tailored suit, dark and precise. Hair without a strand out of place. The kind of man who always looked like he had just arrived from somewhere important. He stepped inside without being invited and sat on the edge of my desk with an ease that was designed to remind me it was not really my desk at all. "Morning, Joel," he said. Early as always. I saved what I was working on. I leaned back in my chair. "Morning," I said. He smiled. It was a practiced smile. The kind that happened in the mouth and stopped there. "I saw a photo from last night," he said. "Looked like a nice dinner." He let that sit there between us. So he had been watching. That answered the question about the text. I said nothing. He tilted his head slightly. "Isabel is a key part of a very sensitive deal," he said. "Her decisions, all of them, including personal ones, affect how investors read the situation. You understand that, right?" "You mean you want to decide who she spends her time with?" I said. He kept smiling. "I mean I want what is best for the firm," he said. "And what is best for the firm right now is clarity, stability, the right kind of story going into the gala." He leaned forward just slightly. "Walk away from this, Joel," he said. "End whatever is happening with Isabel. If you do that, everything stays simple. Your job is safe. Your promotion track is safe. Your name stays clean. You keep building." He paused. "You are a smart man. You know how to read a situation. And if I do not walk away? I asked. His expression did not change. Then you become a variable, he said. And variables have a way of getting corrected. I will not even need to lift a finger. These things tend to sort themselves out. I looked at him. His tie was straight. His cufflinks caught the light. He had rehearsed this or something close to it more than once. I have been looking at the ledgers, I said. The off-site strategy sessions. The advisory fees. The hotel bookings with no minutes filed. Something shifted in his face. Not much. Just a flicker. Be very careful, he said. His voice had lost some of its warmth. You slipped your own terms into her contract, I said. You used her name to cover movements that the board never signed off on. And you have been using the idea of her reputational risk as the excuse to take control of decisions that were never yours to make. He stood up from the edge of my desk. You do not have the full picture, he said. What you have is a loyalty to your friend and a seat at the table you were not invited to. He straightened his jacket. Last warning. Think hard before tonight. He walked out. The door swung shut behind him with a soft, deliberate click. I sat still for a full minute. I was not angry. Anger uses energy you need for other things. I was focused. There is a difference. I spent the rest of the morning going through files with the patience I usually saved for quarterly models. Advisory fees beside his name on dates that did not align with any authorized project. Side agreements signed in his handwriting with approval codes that had been retired months earlier. A string of hotel bookings under the category of offsite strategy. No attendees listed, no notes filed, no outcomes reported. And on the same days, in the firm's internal ledger, numbers that moved in ways the public-facing reports never acknowledged. He was not subtle. He was just used to no one looking. At noon, Isabel messaged me. Conference room on the 4th floor. Bring your lunch. I went. She was already there when I arrived. Suit on, hair in a sharp twist, sitting at the end of the small table with papers spread in front of her. The view outside the window was all gray sky and the slow brown river below. Snow was starting to come down, fine and light. She looked up when I walked in. You look like you had a rough morning, she said. Victor paid me a visit, I said. She closed her eyes for a half second. Of course he did. What did he say? That I should walk away. That if I stayed I would become a variable and variables get corrected. I pushed the folder across the table. But I spent the morning pulling everything my clearance would let me see. Look at this. She flipped through it. Her eyes moved fast, the way they did when she was processing something she already half understood. He is not just managing me, she said slowly. He is lying to my parents. He is lying to investors. He is building something on top of a story that was never true. Exactly, I said. He is selling them the idea of stability while hiding the thing that could crack all of it open. She sat back. Her fingers drummed the edge of the folder. This is not enough for regulators, she said. Not yet. But it might be enough to make my father stop and actually look. She glanced up at me. Will you be there when I show him? I am already here, I said. I am not going anywhere. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, picked up her pen, and we got to work. That evening I went back to her house. She had texted me after our meeting. Come by at 6. I need to think without walls listening. I knocked instead of ringing the bell. She opened the door in leggings and an oversized university hoodie, hair up in a quick knot. No polish, no performance. Just her. She looked younger than she did at the office. More tired, but more real. Come in, she said. I have coffee. The house felt completely different without her parents in it. Warmer. Quieter. The dining room was dark. Only the kitchen and the small back sitting room were lit, and the lamps were the soft kind, the ones that made everything look amber and close. She led me to the kitchen table. My folder from the conference room at lunch was already there, open. Beside it was a second folder I had not seen before, thicker, with handwritten notes visible on the top page. I called my personal lawyer, she said, sitting down across from me and sliding the second folder forward. Not the firm's. Mine. I opened it. her employment contract, her share agreement, a full draft of the merger with notes in the margins in her small, precise handwriting. "We found the clause," she said. "No need to describe it again. We both knew exactly which one. And 3 more. Places where his language does not match the version the board actually approved. He has been slipping revisions through under pressure, and when the numbers shifted because of it, he pointed at my division. He used my name as the explanation. So he has been building himself a safety net out of your reputation," I said. "Yes." She folded her hands on the table. "And he has been doing it for months, right under my father's nose. Does your father know?" "Some of it, maybe," she said. "The version Victor has been feeding him." She paused. "My father is not a cruel man. He is just a man who is used to being told what the smartest move is and trusting that. Victor has been the one telling him." We sat with that for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, the city was settling into its night sounds. Distant traffic. The low hum of wind through the gap between buildings. Then she looked straight at me and said, "I have a plan." "Tell me," I said. "I am going to let the story stand," she said. "I am going to bring you to the Winter Gala. We go together in public and everyone sees that I am not with Victor, that I have made a different choice and I am not ashamed of it. And then, when my father and the board are all in the same room, when the cameras are there and the numbers are about to be presented, I put everything on that table. All of it. In front of everyone. I thought about that. That is a lot riding on one night," I said. "I know," she said. "Which is why I am telling you now, clearly, before you agree to anything." She leaned forward slightly. "This does not just risk my career. It risks yours. If this goes wrong, Victor will try to make you part of the story. People will wonder about your judgment. Your name will be attached to a mess that is not yours. You could lose what you have built here. Future employers might ask questions." I let her finish. She needed to say all of it. Then I said, "I can live with starting over. What I cannot live with is watching someone like Victor Ashby slowly carve his name into your future while you have to smile and act like that is just how things work." She looked at me for a long moment. Something moved through her expression. Something quiet and deep that she did not try to name out loud. "You are sure?" she said. "Yes," I said. "I am not here by accident, Isabel. I am here because I am choosing to be. Because I choose you." The words landed in the room like something that had been true for a long time and was only now being said. Her eyes went wide for just a second. Color came up in her face, slow and honest. "You choose me," she repeated. "I do," I said. "Not as a plan. Not as a strategy. As a person. As you." She stood up from the table. The kitchen felt smaller than it had a moment ago. She stepped around the corner of it, and now there were only a few inches of air between us. "Joel," she said, and this time she did not stumble over it. She said it like she meant exactly that name, exactly that person. She lifted her hand slowly, like she was not quite sure what she was doing with it yet. Then she placed it on my chest, just flat against my shirt. My heart thumped hard against her palm. "I do not know how this ends," she said. "I only know that I do not want to walk into that gala without you beside me." I covered her hand with mine. "Then you will not," I said. She exhaled. Something settled in her. Not relief exactly. Something more permanent than relief. Trust, maybe. The kind that had been building quietly for years and had only just been named. We spent the next hour going through the plan in detail, where we would stand, who would likely approach us, how we would handle Gerald, what we would do if Victor tried to intercept before the documents came out. We laid it out like a map, practical and careful. But every time our hands crossed over the same page, or our fingers touched reaching for the same pen, something in me noticed. And I think she did too. By the time I stood to leave, it was past 9. She walked me to the door. The city outside was cold and dark and still. Snow had started falling again, the quiet kind that muffled everything. At the threshold, she stopped me. "Joel," she said. "Yeah. At the gala. When people ask how serious we are, what are you going to say?" I thought about it. Not for long. I am going to say that I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to, I said. Her throat moved as she swallowed. She nodded, very small. I am not going to tell you to go, she said. Then we are serious, I said. She stood there in the doorway with the snow falling past the porch light, and for one moment I thought she was going to close the distance between us. Her hand lifted toward my face. Then she let it drop and stepped back. Good night, Joel, she said quietly. Her voice was different than it had been 2 hours ago. Softer, less careful. Good night, Isabel, I said. My phone buzzed as I reached the bottom of the steps. Victor. The same unknown number from the night before. I recognized the pattern now. The message was 3 words. See you there. I put the phone in my pocket and walked to my car through the snow. The night of the gala felt like the last hour before a storm you have been watching build all week. The hotel was one of those tall, old-money places in the center of the city. Marble floors in the lobby, chandeliers that caught the light and threw it back in 100 pieces, people moving through the room in dark suits and carefully chosen dresses. The ballroom was enormous. White tablecloths, tall glass vases with flowers, the quiet work of a string quartet in the far corner. Laughter rising and falling above it all, polished and practiced. I straightened my tie in the lobby mirror and felt exactly like what I was. A man from an ordinary background standing in a room built to make people like me feel like they needed permission to breathe. The tuxedo fit well. Isabel had sent my measurements to the rental place herself, which was such a specific, thoughtful thing that I had not known what to do with it when she told me. I saw her at the top of the wide staircase before she saw me. She was wearing a midnight blue dress. Simple lines, nothing flashy, nothing that needed to announce itself. It fit her like it had been made with her exact posture in mind. Her hair was half up, the rest of it falling soft past her shoulders. She stood at the top of those stairs like she had already decided how tonight was going to go. Strong, composed, and when her eyes found mine at the bottom, some of the tension in her face came loose. She walked down slowly. I met her at the last step. You clean up well, she said. So do you, I said. Ready? No, she said. But I am going in anyway. Her fingers slid into mine and we stepped into the ballroom together. Heads turned. I felt it before I saw it. The small pauses in conversation, the glances that slid toward us and then toward the far side of the room. Victor was near the bar holding a glass of something dark, talking to a man in a gray suit. He saw us before we were halfway across the floor. His expression did not collapse. It just sharpened, tightened at the corners. He raised his glass very slightly, which was its own kind of statement. Gerald and Margaret appeared from the side of the room. Gerald was in a tuxedo that fit the way expensive things fit, like it had always been there. His face looked older up close under the ballroom lights. More lines than I remembered from dinner. Margaret stayed close at his shoulder. There was something different in the way she carried herself tonight. Quieter, more deliberate, like a woman who had been doing a great deal of thinking in the week since dinner and had arrived at some conclusions of her own. Isabel, Gerald said quietly when they reached us. Can we speak? We can speak here, she said. She did not move closer to him and she did not let go of my hand. His jaw worked for a moment. Then he looked at me and nodded. Just once. Something in that nod said he had been thinking since dinner. I nodded back. Before anyone could say anything else, the MC tapped the microphone at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please find your seats, we will begin with a brief update from the Hartwell family regarding the upcoming merger and the future of the firm. The room shifted. People began moving toward tables. Gerald leaned in toward Isabel. 15 minutes, he said. If you have something to show me, do it now. Not on that stage. She looked at me. I reached inside my jacket and took out the slim folder. We moved to a side room off the main hall, low chairs, a drinks cart, quiet enough to think. Gerald came with us. Margaret followed. Victor materialized in the doorway a moment later, uninvited, which told you everything you needed to know about him. Get out, Isabel said to him, flat and direct. I have every right to be here, Victor said. I am part of this process. Then you can stand there and hear the truth, I said. I laid the papers on the small table. One clean page of dates and hotel bookings. One page of advisory fees and account movements. One summary of the contract language he had slipped through without board approval, all written in the plainest words I knew how to use. Here, I said to Gerald, these are the off-site sessions your firm paid for. Here are the days the fees moved through accounts tied to Victor. And here is the language he embedded in Isabel's contract. The clause that would hand you and him joint control of her voting rights the moment she refused his proposal. Gerald read. His face was still at first. Then I watched it change, slowly, the way light changes when a cloud moves in front of the sun. He had known something was off. He had been filing things away since Thursday dinner. Now the pieces were in front of him and they only fit one way. Margaret read over his shoulder. Her hand came up to her mouth. Victor laughed once, short and thin. This is nothing, he said. A couple of printouts and a story built around a personal grudge. You want to blow up a merger because your friend has feelings for her coworker. This is not guesswork, Isabel said. My lawyer reviewed every document. These are not drafts. These are finalized changes that you pushed through and then used my name to cover when the numbers did not match. Gerald set the last page down. He looked at Victor. Is this true? Victor spread his hands. Of course not. He turned to Margaret, and his voice went smooth and steady. The voice of a man who has talked his way through things before. Think about the exposure here. Think about what it looks like when the story gets out. Daughter compromises the merger over a personal attachment. Father did not notice. The board will not hold through that kind of headline. But we can still contain this. Right now. If we act. He said it so cleanly that for one long second the room tilted. Then Margaret stepped forward. She moved between Victor and Isabel with a quietness that stopped everyone cold. Stop, she said. Victor went still. We all did. She did not look at him when she spoke next. She looked at Gerald. He has been managing us, she said. Not advising us. There is a difference, and I have been watching it for longer than I admitted to myself. I saw it at dinner on Thursday and I did not say it then. I am saying it now. Margaret, Victor started. No, she said. Her voice was not raised. It was something harder than raised. You have been using our daughter's name as a way to explain your own mistakes. You have been pushing an arrangement we thought she wanted. And she has been trying to tell us for months that she did not. Her eyes finally moved to him. We were not listening to the right person. Gerald straightened. He looked at the folder. Then he looked at Victor. The internal team will go through every file tonight, he said. You will cooperate fully. If you resist, I will take that as my answer. Victor's composure finally cracked, just at the edges. I built the relationships that made this merger possible, he said. You would not have the numbers without me. You built them on a version of this firm that was not honest, I said. Isabel has been keeping the real work alive while you rewrote the story around it. His eyes came to me, his hand curled at his side. I did not move back. I stepped slightly forward, enough to be between him and Isabel, hands loose at my sides. Calm, solid, letting him decide what to do next. He decided nothing, because the door opened. The head of internal compliance came in with two senior people behind him. Gerald spoke to them quietly for less than a minute. Then he turned to Victor and said, We are done here. Victor left. The compliance team went with him. He did not come back into the ballroom. The room felt different after he was gone. Lighter in one way, heavier in another. Isabel sat down in one of the low chairs. Her hands shook, just slightly, just for a moment. She pressed them flat against her knees. That just happened, she said. Yeah, I said. I sat on the edge of the table in front of her, so we were at the same level. Gerald stood across the room. He was quiet for a long time. Then he walked over and crouched down in front of his daughter, which was not the posture of a man used to making himself smaller. He rested one hand on her arm. I was wrong, he said. The words came out slowly, like they had to travel a long way to get out. We were listening to the wrong person, and I made you feel like you had to lie to protect yourself inside your own family. He paused. I am sorry for that. Isabel looked at him for a moment. She did not make it easy. She did not say it is fine or it is okay, because it was not quite those things yet. Thank you, she said. Just that. Gerald nodded. He straightened up. His eyes came to me. You pushed back at my table, he said. Most people do not do that. Most people are not standing next to someone worth pushing back for, I said. He looked at me for a long beat. Then something shifted in his face. Not warmth exactly, but something moving in that direction. He picked up the folder from the table and went to meet the compliance team. Margaret came back into the room alone a few minutes later. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at Isabel and then at me. You are the analyst, she said to me. The one who fixed the model on the Baxter infrastructure deal last October. Yes, I said. She nodded slowly. You are also the person my daughter called when things became too heavy to carry alone. Yes, I said. She studied me for another long moment. Then she said, she needed someone who does not fold when the room gets hard. She glanced at her daughter. It seems she found one. Isabel let out a breath that sounded like a laugh mixed with something more complicated. Did my mother just give us her blessing? She said quietly. Kind of, I said. On the stage, the announcement was measured. A statement about a temporary adjustment in leadership and a thorough internal review. No names were mentioned, but the people in that room were not new to how these things moved. They understood. The band started again. People drifted toward the bar, talking in low, careful voices. The real conversations were happening in the corners. Victor's absence was the loudest thing in the room. Isabel and I stood near a tall window at the back. Snow was falling outside in slow, heavy sheets, blurring the city lights into long, soft smears of color. Neither of us said anything for a little while. We just stood there, in the quiet of what we had just walked through together. Do you regret any of it? She asked. Which part? I said. Saying yes to dinner, she said. Standing up for me. All of it. I thought about my name being attached to this. I thought about the conversations I would have to navigate in the weeks ahead, the people who would look at me sideways, the extra proving I would have to do. I thought about all of it. Not for a second, I said. She turned toward me. In the light from the window, her eyes were darker and softer at the same time. Then I should stop calling you my pretend boyfriend, she said. What are you going to call me instead? I asked. She stepped closer. Just one small step, but the distance between us felt entirely different after it. My boyfriend, she said. For real, without any story around it. She lifted her hand and straightened my collar, her fingers resting lightly on my neck. Is that all right? She asked. I put my hands at her waist, gentle, giving her all the room she needed. For me, I said. That is more than all right. She rose on her toes and kissed me. It was not dramatic. It was not the kind of thing that gets applause. It was warm and quiet and honest. Her hands curled in the fabric of my jacket. When we stepped apart, I pressed my forehead to hers for just a moment and breathed. After tonight, this is not going to be simple, she said softly. I do not want simple, I said. I want real. She nodded against me. Then that is what we build. Weeks passed. The fallout settled the way these things do, slowly, then all at once. Victor was gone. Official statements did not name him, but internal communication did. Words like breach of trust and conduct review moved through the building. The compliance team took a floor. The merger moved forward on new terms, cleaner ones, with Isabel holding a formal seat on the board. Real votes, real weight. Her contract was rewritten without the hooks buried in the language. My name was attached to some of the noise for a while. A few people looked at me differently in the halls. I let them. I could live with that. On a quiet Saturday months later, I sat on my old couch in my apartment with the window going gray and the smell of something good coming from the kitchen. Isabel came in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, wearing my old college sweatshirt, her hair loose and unbothered. She sat beside me and folded her legs up under her and pressed into my side like it was the most natural thing in the world. My parents are coming for dinner next week, she said. Here? I asked, looking around at my mismatched furniture and the plant on the windowsill that was trying its best to stay alive. Here, she said, smiling.
No contracts. No agendas.
Just dinner. I told them they can bring dessert if they want to feel useful. I laughed. Are you going to introduce me the same way? I asked. Drop the word boyfriend like a bomb and see what happens? She set her mug down and turned toward me, tilting her face up to mine. No, she said. This time I am going to tell them the truth. She reached up and put her hand flat on my chest, right where my heart was. This is Joel, she said softly, practicing. The man who stood between me and someone who thought he could own my future. The man who chose me when it was going to cost him. I reached into the drawer of the side table beside the couch. I had been carrying what was inside it in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks before I finally moved it there. I had been waiting for a moment that was real, not staged, not planned for an audience. Just us, in the ordinary light of a Saturday afternoon. I held it out to her. A simple ring. Clean lines. Nothing loud. I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to, I said. And I am done pretending that any part of how I feel about you is temporary. So I am asking you, right here in this apartment with cold coffee and a half-dead plant in the window. She stared at the ring. Then she looked at me. Her eyes filled, but she was smiling through it, wide and unguarded. The realest smile I had ever seen on her face. I am not going to tell you to go, she whispered. Is that a yes? I asked. She laughed, wet and bright. Yes, she said. That is a yes. I slid the ring onto her finger. She looked at it for a moment. Then she leaned in and kissed me, right there on the sagging couch in the ordinary afternoon light. And that was it.
No ballroom. No cameras.
No carefully chosen words for a room full of people watching. Just the two of us, finally saying the thing that had been true for longer than either of us had admitted.